The government in Thailand says it is trying to shut down the criminal scam compounds which have proliferated in recent years along its border with Myanmar by cutting electricity supplies and tightening banking and visa regulations. This follows the rescue last month of a well-known Chinese actor and several other people who'd been abducted and forced to work in the scam centres. The scam business is believed to earn the mainly Chinese crime bosses many billions of dollars every year and has trapped thousands in forced labour. It's resulted in a frenzy of building over on the Myanmar side of the border. The most ambitious of these projects is the newly built city of Shwe Kokko, a $15 billion investment promising casinos, luxury hotels and entertainment complexes. Until recently, it was off limits to journalists, but our Southeast Asia correspondent Jonathan Head was allowed limited access by the Chinese company which runs it.
Well, there are few places on earth stranger than this one. I mean, it looks just like a provincial Chinese city. There are Chinese characters on the sides of all the buildings, and Chinese staff are running the place. Yet this isn't in China. It's in Myanmar's Karen state, one of the poorest and most isolated parts of Asia, where an insurgent group has been waging war against the state for more than 70 years. So why has a Chinese company called Yatai built all of this? It's promising a $15 billion project complete with casinos, luxury villas and cyber parks. The reason, say Yatai's critics, is scam centres, human trafficking and money laundering. Yatai's boss, a Chinese man called Shwe, is currently languishing in a Thai prison wanted by the Chinese government for being a gambling kingpin.
Well, we've been driving around Shwe Kokko for a while now, and this really is the most extraordinary place. Technically, we are in the middle of a war zone in Myanmar, and yet the scale of the building, the ambition of this project is breathtaking. What's much less clear, though, is what the business model is. I mean, they say they've ended the scams and the human trafficking, but looking around at all this, you just can't figure out where the money's coming from to fund it.
Yatai had invited us to see Shwe Kokko, as they call their city, to show they hoped a different side. It's a safe, green city, they kept telling us. Everywhere they've put up these huge billboards, promising in 3 languages that forced labour and human trafficking are no longer permitted. On the streets we saw only the local Karen people who come here to work in the hotels and restaurants. There was, unexpectedly, a library and even a not entirely convincing branch of Starbucks, but we saw few customers. They allowed us to see only the outsides of all the buildings. It's private, they said, when we asked to go in. But some local people quietly told us that the scam business still thrives here. You could see bars on the insides of the windows. At night, Shwe Kokko lights up with 9 casinos, supposedly for Chinese gamblers, but there are few visitors. They allowed us to see these spectacular karaoke rooms, though in them we met only these young Chinese women who work here. And all the time, from the screens on the walls, the face of the now jailed Shwe looked down at us, extolling his vision of a shining new city.
Well, let's speak to our Southeast Asia correspondent, Jonathan Head. Jonathan, hello to you. I mean, journalists are rarely allowed into these kinds of projects. So why do you think the Chinese company Yatai wanted the BBC there?
Well, our best guess is that they're in some trouble. It's clear that this somewhat enigmatic figure, Shwe, who is in a Thai prison, is very important to the project. They really look up to him as their leader. They almost worship him in a way, and they feel they can't progress with him being stuck in prison. But also it's affecting the confidence of people who might be putting money into this city. And really what struck us was that there's a lot of these compounds that have sprung up along the Thai-Myanmar border. Of course, there were in other parts of Asia before that. Mostly they're pretty low key, just basic buildings. People are crammed in there and made to carry out these scams. It's clear that Yatai has aimed a great deal higher, that they genuinely do believe they can build something bigger than just the scams, a genuine resort. It seems a bit crazy to think you can do that in that remote war-torn part of Myanmar, but I think they believe it, and they've put so much investment in they're now really struggling. I don't think they're getting, access has become very difficult. The border's sealed. Myanmar's a war zone. You can't get there. And I just think that the negative publicity about the scams has really hurt them. And they're trying to persuade us that there's something different. And I think they are different. But the reality, as we found when we're there, is that there just isn't any other viable business you can run in an area like that except for these scams.
Well, yeah, I mean, as you say there, alluded to, the company is sort of claiming to have ended the scams. But, what can you make of those claims, having seen it on the ground?
They're not credible. I think what the company has done is, in an alliance with this local armed group which protects them and has given them the land, they're trying to push the most abusive forms of scamming out of Shwe Kokko, and that they're tending to move to these other much smaller scam compounds further south. But the actual scam business, even if it's run by workers who do it voluntarily, is going on. And we met a young woman who'd been working there just a few days before we got there, and she spelled out exactly how they did it. And she said it's right across the city in every building. These were the buildings we were looking at. So they all had bars on the windows. They had labels saying that they're representing them as obscure financial services. We were never allowed to look inside, but she told us all of them have scams operating. And yes, the workers are working there voluntarily, but of course, there are victims of these scams. There are huge numbers of people around the world being defrauded of their savings.
Yeah, and I guess not just there, the scams sort of along the Myanmar-Thailand border. And understand were also mentioned when the Thai Prime Minister met with President Xi yesterday.
Yeah, this is the first visit for this young Thai Prime Minister since she came to office last year to China. It's a very important relationship. Both governments, I would argue, have been pretty slack about addressing the scam problem in this region. China, of course, moved against scams on its own border just over a year ago, very decisively. But it's causing such a fuss because it is a lot of Chinese people are being both defrauded, but also being lured and forced, abducted to work in these scams. You need Chinese speakers to get the victims. And so we had a Chinese actor who was abducted last month and then rescued. His case went viral on social media. And both governments realise now it really is damaging. They have to do something. That is a real problem, particularly for Shwe Kokko. These moves going against them, the cutting of power, of telecoms, of all sorts of other access, are going to make it very difficult for them to function.
Jonathan, we'll have to leave it there, but it's a really fascinating insight. Thank you.